You think you know what hunger feels like? That growl in your stomach when you skip breakfast? During World War II, millions of people redefined the word food in ways that would make your worst college ramen look like fine dining. We're talking tulip bulbs for dinner, wallpaper paste soup, and bread that was half sawdust. Literally sawdust mixed into the flour to make it stretch another day. This isn't about battles or strategy. This is about the bizarre, desperate, and sometimes ingenious things ordinary people put in their mouths just to survive another 24 hours. Britain's Ministry of Food had a problem. Sugar imports had dropped by 70%. Citrus fruits, basically extinct, so they got creative, really creative. They convinced an entire nation that carrots could replace sugar in desserts. Carrot fudge became a thing. You'd boil carrots until mushy, mash them with whatever fat you'd saved. Every drop counted. Add some essence if you were lucky, and pretend it was candy. Kids actually ate it. The ministry pushed carrot jam, carrot marmalade, carrot cookies. One popular recipe called for 4 tablespoons of carrot mixed with orange squash concentrate to make carrot honey. The crown jewel of substitute foods was mock banana. Real bananas hadn't been seen since 1940, so housewives would mash parsnips, yes, parsnips, add banana essence, and serve it to children who'd never tasted an actual banana. One wartime child later recalled thinking bananas were naturally white and mushy. The essence came in tiny bottles, precious as perfume. You'd add exactly 2 drops, 3 would ruin it. Mock goose appeared at Christmas tables. Layer thin sliced potatoes with onions and apples, season with sage, bake it, squint really hard, and maybe it reminded you of poultry. The ministry published recipes for fish paste made from potato and anchovy essence, mock cream from margarine and milk, mock marzipan from haricot beans and almond flavoring. The weird part? Some of it worked. Potato pastry became standard. You'd substitute mashed potato for half the flour, and it actually made decent pie crust, lighter even. Potato scones caught on. Vinegar cake, using vinegar and baking soda for lift instead of eggs, turned out surprisingly moist. They served as survival foods and as chemistry experiments conducted in millions of kitchens. Women's magazines ran competitions for the best mock recipes. The winner one month was mock crab made from dried egg, cheese, and salad cream. Runner-up was mock duck involving lentils shaped into a bird-like form. The psychological need to maintain normalcy through familiar food names was powerful. Calling mashed turnips mock chicken made them easier to swallow. But here's what sticks with me. These weren't starving people. Rationed, yes. Limited, absolutely. But the British government made sure nobody actually starved. These mock foods were about morale as much as calories. Pretending you were eating banana gave you something normal to hold on to while bombs fell on London. That creative self-deception might have been as important as the calories themselves. Germany learned what humiliation tasted like, and it tasted like rutabagas. Before the war, rutabagas were cattle feed, period. Humans didn't eat them. By 1916, during what they called the turnip winter, and again from 1942 onward, rutabagas were breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They called them stekrüben every meal, rutabaga soup for breakfast, rutabaga pancakes for lunch, mashed rutabagas pretending to be potatoes at dinner, rutabaga jam. They actually made jam from turnips, rutabaga coffee if you roasted them long enough. One survivor wrote that the smell of cooking rutabagas made her physically ill for the rest of her life. The propaganda machine worked overtime trying to rebrand them. Victory vegetables, the food of patriots. Nobody bought it. Comedians joked that Germans were developing yellow skin from all the rutabagas. They weren't entirely wrong. Excessive consumption could cause carotenemia, turning skin yellowish. Japan's version was worse. The government officially promoted eating acorns, not as emergency food, as patriotic duty. Instructions appeared in newspapers for processing acorns into flour. First, gather 2 pounds, shell them. Boil repeatedly to remove tannins. Skip this step and you'd be bent over with stomach cramps. Grind into paste. Mix with whatever actual grain you had. Bake into dense, bitter bread. Athens, winter, 1941. The cats disappeared first. Then, the dogs. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious. Family by family, pet by pet, difficult decisions were made behind closed doors. The silence was what survivors remembered most. Cities without birds, streets without stray cats. Athens had thousands of strays before the war. By spring 1942, none. The children noticed first. Where did all the cats go? Parents changed the subject. The process had its own horrible etiquette. You didn't eat your own pet, too emotional. But that stray that had been hanging around, the neighbor's cat that wandered into your yard, urban hunters developed techniques, box traps, snares, following animals to their hiding spots. One survivor described seeing well-dressed women with handbags full of mouse traps, checking them like it was perfectly normal. Prices told the story. In Warsaw, cat meat cost more than horse meat by 1943. A fresh rat commanded the price of a week's official rations. There was a hierarchy. Pigeons were almost respectable, just small chickens really. Cats were a step down but acceptable if you were hungry enough. Rats were the line many wouldn't cross, until they did. Warsaw ghetto residents became expert rat catchers, not the sick ones. That was dangerous. Healthy rats from grain stores were prized. They'd set up elaborate trap lines in basements. Children small enough to fit through rubble became valuable assets, able to pursue rats into spaces adults couldn't reach. One survivor recalled her 6-year-old brother becoming the family's primary protein provider. Italy tried to maintain its culinary dignity longer than most, but by 1943, Neapolitan grandmothers were teaching their granddaughters how to prepare cat. Remove the head immediately. It looks too much like what it is otherwise. Skin it like a rabbit. Soak in vinegar overnight to remove the distinctive taste. Season heavily with whatever herbs you'd managed to grow. Call it roof rabbit. Don't ask questions. The shame lasted generations. After the war, nobody talked about it. Whole neighborhoods participated in collective amnesia. That winter when pets vanished never happened. Those recipes that circulated, nobody remembered them. But the children who lived through it never kept pets as adults. They knew what hunger could make you do. Even now, survivors' accounts dance around the subject. Protein became scarce. We found alternative sources. We did what was necessary. The specifics hide behind euphemisms, but the numbers don't lie. Cities that entered the war with tens of thousands of stray animals emerged with none. Hunger and hunting accounted for their disappearance. Leningrad, February 1942. A chemistry professor figured out that wallpaper paste contained potato starch. Word spread through the frozen city like warmth itself. People steamed wallpaper off walls, scraped the paste, mixed it with water, boiled it into soup. The floral patterns from the wallpaper sometimes left a faint color in the pot. Blue roses meant dinner tonight. Leather was protein. This wasn't theoretical, it was survival chemistry. Belts, shoes, briefcases, book bindings, all made from animal hide. All technically edible if you were desperate enough. The process took 12 to 24 hours. Soak the leather, boil it again. Keep boiling until it softened into something you could chew. The water turned brown, slightly gelatinous. That was dinner. Machine oil became cooking oil if you filtered it enough. Workers would strain industrial lubricants through cloth, over and over, hoping to remove enough toxins to make it safe. Or safe enough. Tomorrow's stomach problems beat today's starvation. Carpenter's glue was made from horses, animal bones and hide boiled down. In peacetime, it held furniture together. In Leningrad, it held people together. You'd melt chunks of glue in water, creating a protein-rich broth that smelled like a woodshop and tasted worse, but it had calories. One survivor described the weird guilt of eating the glue her father had used for his carpentry, like consuming his livelihood along with the furniture. Dutch families discovered mattress stuffing sometimes contained horsehair. Not much, but some. You'd carefully pick apart the mattress, separate the horsehair from the rest, boil it for hours. The result was a stringy, nearly flavorless mass that required extensive chewing. Children were told it was special wartime spaghetti. Library paste, the stuff children used in schools, was potato-based. Starving students would eat it directly from the jar. Teachers looked the other way. What were they going to do? Punish a child for eating paste when there was nothing else? The science was desperately simple. Organic materials contained calories. Find the organic materials, extract the calories, survive another day. People became amateur chemists, testing what could be processed into food. Cork? No calories. Cotton? Technically cellulose but indigestible. Leather? Protein if you could break it down enough. One Leningrad diarist wrote about watching her neighbor boil a leather suitcase. The woman had carried her belongings in it during evacuation. Now she was eating it. The handles went first. They were the thickest leather, then the corners. Finally, the body of the case itself, cut into strips. The brass fittings were saved. Maybe they could be traded for something edible later. Holland's hunger. Winter started in September 1944 and reached its peak that December. The math was simple. A tulip bulb contained about 2% protein, 60% starch. One bulb equaled roughly 200 calories. A family's entire garden might buy them an extra week. But tulip bulbs are poisonous. They contain tulipalin, an alkaloid that causes severe gastric distress. The Dutch learned to process them. Peel off the brown skin, cut away the center. That's where most of the toxin concentrated. Soak in water for hours, changing it repeatedly. Boil, throw away that water. Boil again. Now, maybe it won't make you violently ill. Instructions circulated on which varieties were least toxic. Red Emperor tulips were supposedly safer than Darwin varieties. Yellow tulips caused less nausea than purple ones. This wasn't scientific, just desperate people comparing notes on which bulbs made them less sick. Families faced an impossible choice. Holland's tulip industry was their pride, their heritage, their pre-war identity. They were flowers and descendants of bulbs that had caused tulip mania 3 centuries earlier. Some bloodlines went back generations. Eating them meant destroying irreplaceable genetic history. Andreas de Groot owned a tulip farm outside Amsterdam. He held out until December, watching his children grow thinner. Then, he made the decision. He started with the common varieties. By January, he was digging up bulbs his grandfather had cultivated. Each meal was a small funeral for beauty that would never bloom again. The actress Audrey Hepburn was 16. Living in Arnhem. Decades later, she still remembered the taste. Bitter, acrid, like eating soap mixed with dirt. Her family made tulip soup, tulip pancakes, mashed tulips pretending to be potatoes. She credited those bulbs with keeping her alive. She also never ate tulips again. Couldn't even stand having them in her house. The preparation became ritualistic. Mothers would prepare tulip bulbs while children slept, hoping to spare them the knowledge of what they were eating. Special wartime vegetables, they'd say. Some families ground the bulbs into flour, mixing it with whatever else they had to disguise the origin. Others were past caring. Hunger strips away pretense. By February 1945, even tulip bulbs were running out. People were digging up bulbs they'd already rejected as too small or too toxic. Gardens that had bloomed for decades were now bare earth, pocked with holes from the digging, which, in a way, they were. 20,000 Dutch civilians died during the hunger winter despite these desperate measures, but hundreds of thousands survived because they chose to eat their cultural heritage. After liberation, the government distributed 11 million tulip bulbs to help restore the industry. The flowers that bloom in Holland today are descendants of bulbs hidden by farmers who chose starvation over destroying the last of their stock. Every spring, those flowers are memorials to both beauty and desperation. Concentration camps had their own horrible arithmetic. Official rations provided 1,300 calories daily for workers, 1,000 for non-workers. Except those numbers were fiction. By 1944, soup was water with the memory of turnips. Bread was sawdust held together with hope. Prisoners picked grass from between barracks. Certain grasses were less likely to cause dysentery. Dandelion leaves were prizes. Clover was acceptable. New arrivals were taught which weeds wouldn't kill them immediately. The knowledge passed person to person, a survival curriculum nobody wanted to learn. Some discovered that undigested grain passed through the digestive systems of horses. They'd wait near stables, collect horse droppings, wash them repeatedly, pick out individual grains. Each grain was a small victory against death. The human dignity versus survival equation had only one answer that mattered. In Japanese war prisoner camps, the official rice ration was contaminated with weevils. Guards considered this a problem. Prisoners considered it protein. They'd carefully shake the insects to the top of their rice bowl, eating them first before they could crawl away. Some prisoners reported that towards the end they looked forward to weevil days. Stalingrad, winter 1942. Surrounded German soldiers had eaten their horses by December. By January, they were boiling the hides. They'd already consumed the leather from their boots, their belts, their rifle slings. Soldiers gnawed on gun oil-soaked leather straps from their equipment. The oil might be toxic, but toxic was a tomorrow problem. Starvation was a today problem. Pacific Islands were worse. Japanese soldiers cut off from supply lines caught and ate monitor lizards, snakes, anything that moved. When animals ran out, they boiled grass, tree bark, their own leather equipment. Reports describe soldiers sucking on stones to generate saliva, convincing their bodies they were eating. The worst boundary was the one nobody discussed until decades later. Leningrad's archives record 2,000 arrests for cannibalism during the siege. The actual number was certainly higher. Most cases were never reported. Families simply noticed members had disappeared. Nobody asked questions. Asking questions meant acknowledging possibilities nobody wanted to acknowledge. The Japanese military issued orders explicitly forbidding the consumption of enemy dead. The fact they needed to issue such orders tells you everything. Soldiers on bypassed islands, knowing no rescue was coming, faced choices that peacetime minds can't process. The orders suggest some made those choices. Camp survivors rarely discuss the final weeks before liberation. We ate things, they say. We survived. The details remain unspoken. Some boundaries, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. Some survival comes at costs that take lifetimes to repay, and even then, the debt remains. These weren't distant ancestors dealing with prehistoric famine. These were modern people with refrigerators and restaurants in their recent memory. 3 years earlier, they'd complained about overcooked steaks. Now they were calculating the protein content of boiled leather. The truly unsettling part is how quickly people adapted to what they ate. 2 months from complaining about rationing to accepting sawdust bread. 6 months from hiding pet food to hunting pets. A year from being disgusted by rutabagas to grateful for them. The transformation from civilization to survival happens faster than anyone wants to believe. Most of these foods disappeared after the war. Nobody makes tulip bulb soup anymore. Wallpaper paste recipes didn't make it into cookbooks, but some things stuck. Carrot cake is in every bakery today. Margarine never left our tables. The British still eat beans on toast. These have moved from poverty foods to everyday food. We forgot they were born from desperation. The survivors carried different lessons. Some hoarded food for the rest of their lives, closets full of canned goods they'd never eat. Others couldn't stand waste, finishing every crumb on every plate. Many couldn't eat certain foods. Rutabagas, Spam, anything that reminded them of those years. The body might forget hunger, but the mind never does. We live in abundance that would seem impossible to someone from 1943. Your grocery store has 40 types of breakfast cereal. You throw away food because you bought too much. You diet to lose weight. These would be incomprehensible luxuries to someone who spent months calculating whether wallpaper paste had enough calories to justify the effort of scraping it off. The next time you push away a plate because something doesn't taste quite right, remember that someone once risked their life for the calories you're rejecting. Someone ate sawdust bread and was grateful. Someone boiled leather and called it soup. Someone chose to eat beauty itself rather than starve. They survived so we could be picky eaters. The least we can do is remember what hungry really means.